Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're going to step into a story that begins in the quiet hours of a college dorm where fluorescent hallway lights buzz faintly and the hum of late night chatter echoes through thin walls. A murder mystery has occurred. A young woman went missing right out of a place that was supposed to feel safe, her own shared room on campus. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you really like what I'm doing here. It's the only way I can keep bringing you more of these long, unsettling cases. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, what city or town, maybe even what dorm or apartment life feels like for you. You never know, someone else watching might live nearby and you'll connect in a strange way over stories like this. Now, turn off the lights, lie back on your comfy cushions, and let's get moving tonight. The dorm before midnight had a strange rhythm of its own. If you've ever lived in one, you know the mix, the muffled sound of music leaking under doors, the smell of instant noodles blending with perfume and cheap body spray, and the endless coming and going of students at all hours. In 2002, at a mid-sized university tucked into the Northeast, the residence halls were a mashup of beige paint-tiled floors and cinder-block walls designed more for durability than comfort. Jennifer, a sophomore, lived on the third floor of Holloway Hall. She was known among her friends as the one who always kept her side of the room neat, stacked textbooks bed, perfectly tucked, a small corkboard pinned with reminders in her rounded handwriting. Across from her lived Emily, her roommate, the complete opposite in terms of organization. Emily's desk was a scatter of papers, snack wrappers, and half-filled notebooks. People used to joke that Jennifer and Emily were the odd couple of Holloway Hall. But behind the jokes, there was tension. Not open fighting, but those subtle silences, the way Jennifer's jaw would tighten when she noticed Emily borrowing her things, the way Emily rolled her eyes whenever Jennifer reminded her about quiet hours. On the night of her disappearance, Jennifer had been in good spirits. A friend from her sociology class had invited her to a campus party, a casual, crowded affair in a nearby fraternity house. She'd dressed in jeans and a fitted blue sweater, her hair loose, makeup light. Emily didn't feel like going. She told people later she had a headache and decided to stay behind, flipping through magazines while music played faintly from her laptop. As Jennifer left that night, she told Emily not to lock the door, she'd be back later. It was around 9:30 p.m. The sound of her footsteps fading down the hall was ordinary, nothing unusual. But that was the last moment anyone could say with certainty where Jennifer was alive and safe. Dorms can be deceptive places. With people constantly moving about, one face blends into another and memory blurs quickly. Several residents later swore they saw Jennifer come back around midnight, walking down the hall with her phone in hand. One even claimed she greeted them with a tired smile. But none of these recollections matched exactly in timing, and investigators would later debate whether these memories were reliable or simply manufactured by gossip. Detectives are still debating whether those late-night sightings were real or the result of collective suggestion that spread like wildfire after the disappearance. What we do know, midnight in the dorm felt restless. Music from the fourth floor drifted down through the stairwell. Someone was microwaving popcorn at the lounge. And in Jennifer and Emily's room, only one bed would be filled when the sun rose again. There's a historical fact here worth noting. In 2002, campus security protocols were far looser than what we see today. Card key systems were only beginning to roll out. Many dorms still relied on physical keys and basic sign-in sheets for visitors. Holloway Hall was no different. Doors could be propped open with a shoe, and the night security guard often napped through his shift. The idea that someone could slip in unnoticed wasn't far-fetched at all. But that first night, nobody noticed anything amiss. To the dozens of students stumbling back from parties, nothing seemed unusual. The hallway lights buzzed as usual. The vending machine whirred, and behind closed doors, secrets were being kept. Emily, according to her statement, later fell asleep around 11 p.m. She said she never heard Jennifer come back in. She said she slept soundly, unaware of anything strange happening just feet away. And yet one strange detail crept into the record from that night. A resident down the hall, pulling an all-nighter with headphones on, swore he heard faint scratching sounds in the walls. At the time, he thought it was just rats or pipes groaning. He laughed it off the next morning. Years later, when the truth came out, he admitted that memory never stopped haunting him. In the moment, though, no one knew Jennifer was gone. The next morning, her bed was empty, her phone was missing, and her carefully stacked textbook sat untouched, waiting for her to return. That dorm before midnight seemed ordinary, but like so many unsolved mysteries, it was the last place anyone saw her alive. Jennifer's night out was meant to be nothing more than a short escape from textbooks and deadlines. That's how college parties were really an excuse to feel free for a few hours, to blur into a crowd of bodies moving to cheap speakers and neon lights. She had told her roommate Emily that she wouldn't be late. "I'll be back before midnight," she said, her voice half apologetic, as though even going out required justification. The party itself was one of those semi-legendary campus gatherings hosted at an old fraternity house that had seen better days. Wooden floors sticky with spilled beer, faded couches sagging under clusters of students' posters of bands plastered on walls. There was nothing glamorous about it, but in the dimness and noise, people loosened their grip on who they thought they were. Jennifer wasn't a big drinker. Friends remembered her holding a red plastic cup with soda, quietly laughing at jokes, blending in more than standing out. But she stood out to Emily. Staying behind in their dorm room, Emily stewed in a kind of restless silence. She wasn't much of a joiner. She didn't like the loud, crowded chaos of parties. But more than that, she didn't like Jennifer's ease with people, her ability to slip into conversations, to draw attention without even trying. Resentment works quietly at first, creeping through little moments: Jennifer's neat desk compared to her own clutter, Jennifer's grades that always seemed a notch higher, Jennifer's smile that attracted attention in ways Emily's never did. And here's something unusual: Emily later claimed she spent that night reading, but the book she listed in her police statement hadn't even been released yet at the time. Investigators caught that detail years later, pointing out the inconsistency. Was it a slip of memory, or was it a sign of her carefully constructing an alibi she thought would sound ordinary, but didn't match reality? Detectives and academic analysts are still debating whether this book slip was intentional deception or simple human error under stress. Meanwhile, at the party, Jennifer was seen chatting with a small circle of classmates. One person later swore they saw her leave around 11:30, phone in hand, as though texting someone. Another insisted she left closer to midnight. No one remembered her leaving with anyone, just one girl walking alone toward campus under yellow streetlights. The walk back to Holloway Hall wasn't far, just across a few streets past the campus green, a 10-minute stroll at most. Security cameras on campus were almost non-existent then, just a few grainy black and white feeds near the library entrance and the parking lot. No footage ever surfaced to confirm her walk. Back in the dorm, Emily said she kept her door unlocked, just as Jennifer had asked. She claimed she dozed off around 11, drifting into sleep with her laptop still glowing beside her. But here's the part that doesn't sit right with many people. Another student across the hall remembered hearing voices from Jennifer in Emily's room sometime after midnight. Not loud, just murmured, two women's voices rising and falling like a private argument. When asked years later, that witness admitted they couldn't be 100% sure if it was that room or the one next door, but the timing haunted them all the same. History reminds us how easy it was in those early 2000s for a disappearance to slip through the cracks. The National Crime Information Center reported that nearly 840,000 missing persons cases were entered into its database in 2001 alone. Most were runaways resolved quickly, but that sheer volume made it easy for college-age cases like Jennifer's to get lost, at least in those first crucial days. Jennifer never texted her parents that night. She never called a friend to say she was home. By morning, her bed was still empty, her side of the room untouched. Her blue sweater was missing, her phone gone, but her textbooks, wallet, and class notes remained. And then came the first odd campus-wide ripple. A student claimed they saw Jennifer in the hallway around midnight, phone glowing in her hand, smiling faintly as she walked past. Another insisted they saw her in the stairwell. Those accounts clashed and blurred, but they were all adamant. The strange part: no two students could agree on what she was wearing. Uncertainty is a powerful fuel for legend. The party call, that last known step into the night, was the hinge. Did Jennifer walk back alone only to vanish before ever entering the dorm? Or did she return, step into the room she shared with Emily, and disappear into a darker story that hadn't yet surfaced? One more strange note in campus archives, a maintenance report was filed for Holloway Hall the very next morning, unrelated to Jennifer's absence. It described noise complaints from pipes in the third-floor walls, a mundane entry at the time. Years later, that scrap of paperwork would take on a chilling weight. That party call was the last real trace anyone could confidently hold. The rest was speculation shadowed by suspicion, waiting for the truth to crack open years down the line. The last time anyone claimed to have seen Jennifer alive was in the hallway of Holloway Hall. Memories are slippery, especially when the ordinary becomes extraordinary after the fact. Ask anyone to describe a normal Tuesday night and you'll get blanks. Ask them about the night someone went missing, and suddenly every detail sharpens, whether it really happened that way or not. Several dorm residents were adamant that Jennifer returned to the building after leaving the party. One girl said she saw her in the hallway near the vending machine around midnight, scrolling on her flip phone as she passed. Another swore she caught sight of Jennifer near the bathroom door, her hair damp as if she'd just showered. Yet another thought she'd seen her in the stairwell clutching a blue sweater around herself. The problem: none of these accounts matched perfectly. The official police log would later record that Jennifer's phone activity ended at exactly 11:57 p.m. The final signal pinged a tower just 3 blocks from the dorm. After that silence, no outgoing calls, no texts, nothing. That detail became a cornerstone of the investigation. Did she reach her dorm and simply turn the phone off, or did something else happen in those 3 missing minutes between the ping and her supposed hallway sightings? Investigators and detectives are still debating whether those reports were authentic memories or confabulations born out of fear and rumor. Inside the room she shared with Emily, things appeared disturbingly normal. Emily insisted she had been asleep by then, laptop glowing faintly beside her until the battery drained. She told police she never heard Jennifer come in, but the neighbor across the hall reported something different, muted voices coming from the room sometime after midnight. The witness said it sounded like 2 women speaking sharply, though never loud enough to catch words. Later, the same neighbor admitted to police that they didn't want to get involved at the time, brushing it off as a roommate spat. Here's the strange detail that doesn't sit well. The fire doors on the 3rd floor had a nasty squeak whenever opened loud enough to wake light sleepers. Several students said they remembered hearing the door open and close between midnight and 1 a.m., but none of them could confirm seeing who passed through. It was such a common noise in dorm life that no one thought twice until afterward, when every creak became sinister. Historically, the early 2000s were years of growing campus safety concerns. The Clery Act, a federal law passed in 1990, required colleges to report campus crime statistics, but enforcement was shaky. Many universities downplayed crimes to preserve their reputations. Holloway Hall was no exception. Police later admitted that campus security hadn't logged a single visitor entry that night. Either no visitors signed in or someone deliberately ignored the process. By morning, Jennifer's absence was undeniable. Her bed was untouched, her side of the room immaculate as always. Her desk lamp sat off her notebooks neatly stacked. It was eerie in its precision, like a still life waiting for its subject. Emily told police she assumed Jennifer had stayed at a friend's place after the party. She said she only grew worried when Jennifer's phone kept going straight to voicemail the next day. Students whispered among themselves, piecing together fragments of sightings. Some claimed Jennifer was laughing on her phone in the hall. Others said she looked upset, but if she really had returned, why had no one seen her actually enter her room, and why did Emily insist so firmly that she hadn't? The hallway itself became a point of fixation. Investigators mapped out who lived in which room, where doors opened, how sound traveled. They knocked on every door, asking if anyone had noticed strange activity. The majority said no. A few recalled the squeaky fire door, and one, late in giving their statement, claimed they heard something like muffled thuds, as though heavy furniture was being moved. That statement never made it into the official case file. Whether it was ignored, misplaced, or deliberately suppressed, no one knows. What's clear is that Jennifer's last scene in the hallway became more legend than certainty. With each retelling, details grew hazier, memories warped. But one fact remained: Jennifer never attended her classes again. It was as if she had walked down that hallway and stepped off the edge of the earth. By the time the sun rose over campus the next morning, The small rituals of daily life carried on as if nothing had happened. The dining hall clattered with trays, and chatter students shuffled half awake to morning lectures, and Holloway Hall buzzed with its usual mix of yawns, laughter, and caffeine. Only one absence was immediately felt: Jennifer's. She never missed class. She was the type who showed up 5 minutes early, notebooks, aligned, pens organized. When she failed to appear for her sociology seminar, her professor noticed. At first it was a shrug, students skipped all the time. But by afternoon, whispers had begun to spread. Friends texted her. Calls went to voicemail. Her roommate, Emily, mentioned casually that Jennifer hadn't come back to the room the night before. She must have crashed at a friend's place, Emily suggested. It sounded reasonable enough, but by evening concern hardened into alarm. Jennifer's parents were called. They hadn't heard from her either, and that was entirely out of character. By 9 p.m., campus police were notified. And so began the formal investigation, one that would stretch far beyond the walls of the dorm. Police arrived that night, officers in dark jackets, walking the third-floor hall with notebooks in hand. They asked the usual questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Did she seem upset? The answers were vague, inconsistent. Some said she returned from the party. Others insisted she never made it back. The timeline was already fractured. The officers checked Jennifer's room. Nothing suggested a struggle. Her bed was untouched, her desk orderly. Her backpack was still there, along with her wallet, but her phone and blue sweater were missing. Emily repeated her story. She'd gone to sleep around 11 p.m., hadn't heard Jennifer come in, and assumed she was out late. She spoke calmly, almost too calmly, some students later said. Here's the strange detail: one officer noted in his report that Emily's side of the room smelled faintly of fresh paint. He assumed at the time it was from some art project or nail polish remover. Nobody followed up on that observation until much later. Interviews continued late into the night. Students shuffled in and out of the lounge, giving statements, repeating fragments of memory. One swore they heard two voices arguing behind Jennifer and Emily's door around midnight. Another remembered hearing scraping sounds like something heavy dragged across the floor. Investigators pressed Emily on whether she'd argued with Jennifer. She denied it flatly, saying their relationship was normal, even friendly. Historical fact: the average clearance rate for missing person cases in the early 2000s was only about 60% in the U.S. That meant 4 out of every 10 cases stayed unresolved, lingering in limbo. Holloway Hall was about to become another statistic in that grim ledger. Detectives canvassed the building looking for security footage. They found almost nothing. The dorm had no cameras in the hallways, only a broken unit near the entrance that hadn't recorded in months. The night security guard admitted sheepishly that he'd spent most of the shift in the lobby watching TV. No one remembered signing Jennifer in or out. The lack of evidence frustrated investigators. It also fueled campus gossip. Students whispered theories in the cafeteria, online forums, late-night study groups. Some said Jennifer had been kidnapped walking back from the party. Others believed she'd run away, overwhelmed by school pressure. A few even joked darkly that Holloway Hall was haunted, that the building had swallowed her up. But one unsettling detail surfaced. A maintenance worker came forward saying he'd received a complaint about strange noises in the walls on the third floor that very night. Scraping, tapping, like something moving inside. He'd brushed it off, assuming it was just pipes or rodents. Years later, that testimony would become one of the case's most chilling threads. For now, though, police faced dead ends. Jennifer was gone without clear trace, and the first seeds of doubt about Emily's calm demeanor began to take root. Some officers privately wondered, was she simply detached, or was she hiding something? The investigation had officially begun, but it already felt like chasing shadows. Emily's composure unnerved people almost as much as Jennifer's disappearance itself. While friends of Jennifer cried in the lounge, posting missing posters on bulletin boards, Emily moved through the dorm like nothing had happened. She showed up to classes, answered questions with clipped calmness, and even made small jokes that felt out of place given the circumstances. Students whispered. One described her demeanor as like she was reading from a script. Another recalled her shrugging off questions with, "She probably just needed space. People do that." On its face, it was a plausible explanation. College students sometimes did vanish briefly, chasing romance or freedom. But in Jennifer's case, the silence was too absolute. Police noticed it too. During interviews, Emily's answers were straightforward but oddly detached. Asked when she last saw Jennifer, she repeated, "She left for a party around 9:30. Said she'd be back later. I went to bed before she returned." Asked if they had argued, she smiled faintly and said, "We had normal roommate disagreements, nothing unusual." Yet here's the strange detail: Emily's fingernails were trimmed to the quick that week, shorter than usual, the edges raw, as if chewed nervously. A small thing, but one officer noted it in his report. Was it stress or something else? Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this tiny observation was overlooked evidence or irrelevant coincidence. Jennifer's family arrived on campus within 48 hours. Their presence changed everything. They were frantic, posting flyers pleading on local news stations. They couldn't reconcile Emily's detached tone with the urgency of their daughter's disappearance. Her father later said it was like she was describing the weather. The investigation widened. Police pulled phone records, checking for calls or texts after Jennifer's last signal at 11:57 p.m. Nothing. Credit card used, none. Social security number untouched. It was as if she had evaporated. Statistically, by the third day, chances of finding a missing person alive dropped dramatically. That statistic became a grim shadow over Holloway Hall. Meanwhile, suspicion around Emily deepened. One of Jennifer's friends confided that Jennifer had been frustrated with her roommate in recent weeks. She said Emily had borrowed clothes without asking, left dirty dishes around, and once snapped at Jennifer during a study session. Small frictions, yes, but when placed under the microscope of a disappearance, they grew sinister. Late-night conversations among students spun wild theories. Some said Emily knew more than she let on. Others wondered if an outsider had slipped into the dorm, taking advantage of lax security. One rumor suggested Jennifer had been seen with a stranger near the quad. None of these theories stuck, but they circulated relentlessly. Historically, we know that eyewitness testimony is deeply unreliable. A 1996 Department of Justice study found that misidentification is one of the leading causes of wrongful convictions. The Jennifer case became a textbook example of how memory can warp under pressure. Some swore Emily was lying. Others swore Jennifer had been seen alive after midnight. The contradictions tangled everything. What did stand out was Emily's curious calm. One afternoon, a fellow student remembered confronting her directly. "Aren't you scared your roommate is gone?" Emily's reply chilled them. "She'll turn up. People always do." But Jennifer didn't turn up. And every day, Emily moved with the same poise. Suspicion grew heavier. She started skipping group searches, claiming she needed to focus on exams. She stopped answering questions from friends, brushing them off with thin smiles. There's a phrase in criminology: behavior out of sync with crisis. It doesn't prove guilt, but it draws attention. Emily's behavior was precisely that. Whether it was shock denial or something darker, no one could agree. Still, the idea that she was the last to see Jennifer, the only one who shared that room, gnawed at investigators. They couldn't prove she knew more, but they couldn't shake the sense that she did. Holloway Hall carried on with its daily routines, but for those who paid attention, something had shifted. Every glance at Emily carried unspoken questions. Every silence stretched into accusation. And Emily, cool as ever, walked through it all as if she were untouchable. By the end of the first week, Jennifer's face was everywhere. Flyers lined the bulletin boards, taped to lampposts, fluttering on the windshields of cars parked near campus. The black and white photocopied sheets bore her smiling photo, the words "Missing Student" bold across the top, and a hotline number at the bottom. Students carried stacks of them between classes, handing them out in the dining hall, the library, even off campus in local coffee shops and gas stations. The sight of her face multiplied the unease. At first, people whispered about Jennifer like a ghost. Was she alive? Was she not? But now her absence was undeniable, and the community's guilt deepened. It became a campus-wide mission, a collective attempt to drag her back into reality through sheer effort. Her family set up a table in front of the student center. They stood there in the chill of early spring, thanking anyone who took a flyer. Jennifer's mother cried openly. Her father clenched his jaw so hard it looked painful. Students walked past in silence, offering awkward smiles, some stopping to help others, hurrying away from the raw display of grief. Emily was there at first, standing stiffly behind the table, distributing flyers with robotic precision. But after 2 days, she was gone. When asked, she claimed she needed to focus on schoolwork. Her absence left a bitter taste. Then came the odd witness report. A sophomore who lived on the floor below Jennifer and Emily came forward with something unusual. On the night of the disappearance, just past midnight, she said she heard muffled noises from above, like furniture being dragged or something thumping against the floor. At the time, she assumed it was late-night horseplay or someone moving heavy boxes, but in hindsight, it gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the sound of those irregular, heavy bangs. Investigators logged the statement, but with no corroboration, it remained a puzzle piece without a slot. Some dismissed it outright. Others argued it might be critical. Detectives and academics are still debating whether that thumping was the key moment of violence or just an ordinary dorm commotion that gained new weight afterward. There was another oddity. Several students reported seeing Emily late at night during the search week, carrying a large black trash bag down the stairwell. When asked, she said it was laundry. No one checked the bag. No one wanted to. The sight of her descending the stairs with that dark shape became another rumor folded into the fabric of campus mythology. Historically, cases like Jennifer's often hinged on early witness cooperation. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the first 72 hours are considered the golden window for gathering reliable testimony. After that, memory degrades, details blur, and narratives shift. In Jennifer's case, that window closed quickly, leaving behind a muddle of contradictions. Still, her missing posters clung stubbornly to walls, their corners curling as days turned to weeks. Students began to avoid making eye contact with them. Cafeteria conversations grew hushed. Holloway Hall residents tiptoed past Jennifer's door, glancing sideways at the paper taped there with her smiling face. And Emily. She kept her door shut more often now, her blinds drawn. She answered questions with clipped words, sometimes with silence. One student remembered asking her if she thought Jennifer was still alive. Emily had shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. People disappear all the time. That comment spread like wildfire. It cemented the belief among many that she knew more than she let on. The missing posters, once a symbol of hope, began to feel like tombstones plastered in paper, and beneath their watchful eyes, suspicion pooled thicker around Emily even as the official investigation stalled. The search dragged on, but the campus itself seemed to turn inward, its walls absorbing secrets. Detectives decided to make another sweep of Holloway Hall. This time, the focus was narrower: Jennifer's room, Emily's belongings, and anything that might explain what really happened the night she vanished. Students watched nervously as officers carried boxes out of the dorm. Some were filled with ordinary things: notebooks, empty coffee mugs, and folded clothes. Others were stranger, unsettling in their ambiguity. Among Emily's possessions, they discovered several handwritten notes scrawled on yellow legal pads. The notes weren't class assignments. They were fragmented thoughts, short sentences repeated over and over like rehearsals. She doesn't listen. She doesn't care. She deserves silence. That phrase appeared at least 3 times in different variations. Another page simply read, "Walls remember what people forget." Police bagged everything, but none of it proved anything. Emily was a creative writing major. She insisted the pages were just free writing exercises for class. Professors confirmed she'd turned in similarly bizarre assignments before, odd, but within the realm of artistic experimentation. The debate persists even now: were the notes chilling evidence of malice or merely misunderstood creative ramblings? Then there was the trunk. At the foot of Emily's bed sat a heavy, locked steamer trunk covered with stickers from thrift shops and secondhand stores. When officers asked for the key, she hesitated before handing it over. Inside the trunk was an organized mess: layers of folded blankets, stacks of secondhand novels, and a shoebox containing trinkets. But deeper inside, investigators found something that gnawed at them: a small collection of personal items that didn't belong to Emily. A necklace Jennifer often wore, a hairbrush with strands unmistakably blonde, and a university ID card tucked between 2 books. When questioned, Emily explained easily Jennifer had left the items behind. She kept them safe in the trunk to avoid losing them. But the investigators weren't satisfied. Why lock them away? Why not keep them in plain sight for Jennifer's family? Stranger still, the trunk smelled faintly of something chemical like cleaning solution, sharp and artificial. Forensic testing at the time turned up nothing conclusive, but the smell was logged in the official report. Some officers swore it was bleach. Others insisted it was nothing more than mothballs. Outside the dorm, whispers spread fast. Students speculated about the trunk's contents, some imagining far darker things than jewelry or hairbrushes. The idea of Emily hoarding Jennifer's belongings fit neatly into the growing portrait of her as secretive and dangerous. Yet without solid proof, the trunk became just another unresolved symbol. Investigators were frustrated, forced to release Emily's belongings back to her after cataloging them. She carried the trunk out of Holloway Hall with a strange determination, as though daring anyone to stop her. In the broader history of missing persons investigations, locked containers almost always fuel suspicion. Criminology lectures often cite a notorious 1950s case in which a missing boy's personal effects were hidden inside his friend's toy chest, later proven to be a chilling clue. In Jennifer's case, however, the locked trunk remained maddeningly ambiguous, a relic without resolution. As for the strange notes, they were filed away, never rising to the level of admissible evidence. But among students, they became campus folklore. People whispered the phrases in dark hallways, walls remember what people forget. Some even scrawled the line in chalk outside Holloway Hall until campus security scrubbed it clean. Every object Emily possessed seemed to walk the razor's edge between innocence and accusation. Each discovery raised more questions than it answered, and as the days stretched into weeks, the search for Jennifer felt less like a rescue mission and more like a slow descent into a labyrinth of symbols, rumors, and shadows. And still, no Jennifer. Only silence. By late April, when the air smelled faintly of rain and budding trees, investigators stumbled on a new detail, not from Emily's room this time, but from the dorm building itself. Holloway Hall was old, a squat brick structure built in the late 1960s, and its maintenance records were dense with minor repairs. But one entry dated just 2 days after Jennifer vanished stood out. The log noted emergency wall patching north wing second floor. That, of course, was Jennifer and Emily's hall. The request had been made by the night maintenance supervisor, who reported a section of drywall cracked and flaking near the end of the corridor. On paper, it looked routine, but to detectives, it screamed of bad timing. Students who lived there remembered men arriving late at night, wheeling carts with plaster and paint. They worked quickly, sealing off a small square of wall near the fire extinguisher box. When asked later, one maintenance worker said the wall had looked strange, almost like someone had punched or kicked it from the inside. The comment was filed but never explained. Rumors erupted overnight. Some claimed Jennifer had been hidden in the walls. Others said Emily was seen lingering nearby while the repairs were underway. No one could prove anything, but the imagery was too haunting to shake. Walls remember what people forget. The phrase from Emily's notebook now took on a sinister echo. Students repeated it in hushed tones, convinced the repairs and the notes were linked. Investigators weren't blind to the parallel. They even requested to reopen the patched section, but campus administrators resisted. They argued that without probable cause, tearing apart structural work would set a dangerous precedent. Bureaucracy won over suspicion, and the wall remained sealed. Still, the thought festered. One criminology professor brought in as a consultant later remarked, "It is entirely possible the wall itself was a crime scene. But sometimes the crime scene is the one place you're not allowed to touch." That observation fueled years of debate in academic circles. Was the truth literally plastered over? Meanwhile, Emily grew more reclusive. She skipped classes, withdrew from study groups, and was seen pacing the hallways late at night. More than one student swore they heard her muttering to herself about cracks and secrets. Others dismissed it as exaggerated gossip, but the effect was the same. She became the center of the campus storm. In missing person cases, strange home repairs often signal concealment. Historical examples abound, most famously the 1930s murder house in Cleveland, where a newly bricked-over section of basement eventually revealed human remains. Whether Holloway Hall's patched wall fell into that category remained a mystery, one wrapped in red tape and unanswered questions. The unease of it changed how students moved through the building. They avoided the repaired section, glancing at it sidelong as if expecting to hear scratching from the other side. Resident assistants begged administrators to reassure the community, but officials offered only generic safety memos. What lingered was the image of that square of fresh plaster, too new, too clean, compared to the faded walls around it. A scar in the corridor, a reminder of something unresolved. And so the legend grew. Jennifer wasn't gone. She was right there entombed in the dorm itself, waiting for someone brave enough to break through the plaster. By the start of summer term, the tension inside Holloway Hall was unbearable. Students tiptoed past Jennifer's old room, avoided the patched wall at the end of the corridor, and whispered Emily's name as though she could appear behind them at any moment. The rumor mill had long since overtaken official statements. For many, it wasn't a question of whether Emily was involved, it was when she would finally be caught. But then, without warning, Emily was gone. She filed a withdrawal slip in early June, citing personal stress and mental health reasons, and by the end of the week, her side of the dorm room was empty. No trunk, no notebooks, no blankets folded just so at the foot of her bed. The blinds that had been perpetually drawn now hung loose sunlight filling the hollow space she left behind. For the students who remained, her sudden departure only confirmed suspicions. She ran, one whispered in the cafeteria line. Guilty people run. Another added, or maybe she's next. Maybe whatever got Jennifer came for her too. It didn't matter which theory people leaned toward, the effect was the same. Holloway Hall was no longer just a dorm. It was a haunted building. Jennifer's family was furious. They accused the university of letting Emily slip away too easily, of failing to press harder, of choosing liability over justice. Police countered that there was still no evidence linking Emily to Jennifer's disappearance. Without charges, they couldn't hold her. The frustration was palpable. Historically, this isn't uncommon. In the case of Ruthie Mae McCoy in the late 1980s, officials also failed to detain key figures due to lack of evidence, only to discover years later that initial suspicions were justified. Investigators and criminologists still debate whether the system prioritizes caution at the expense of resolution. Emily's departure changed everything. Rumors morphed into full-blown campus mythology. Some swore she'd left the state under a different name, living quietly in a cabin. Others claimed she transferred to a new school and blended seamlessly into another life. A few insisted she still lurked nearby, watching the dorm at night. The timing of her exit was too suspicious to ignore. Only a few days earlier, new whispers had spread that police were considering reopening the repaired wall. Emily left before that could happen. To some, that looked like guilt. To others, it looked like fear. In her absence, the room felt like a crime scene frozen in amber. The university locked the door, officially citing ongoing investigation, but students sneaked peeks when they could. They described it as unnervingly ordinary: two twin beds, one stripped bare, the other with Jennifer's faded quilt still folded neatly across it. An empty desk, a closet door ajar. The banality of it all was worse than horror. It was a void. The legend deepened. Holloway Hall became a stop on unofficial ghost tours run by students after midnight. They'd gather by the patched wall, dare each other to knock and whisper, "Jennifer, are you there?" Some swore they heard faint thumps in reply. The administrators hated it. They issued statements, held community forums, and doubled down on security patrols. None of it mattered. Once a building is marked by tragedy, it never loses the stain. Emily's name faded from official reports, but it burned brighter in gossip. She became a phantom in her own right, a girl who walked away from campus just as easily as Jennifer had vanished. Two disappearances, one literal, one figurative, braided together until people couldn't tell where truth ended and rumor began. And so the case went cold with Emily gone, Jennifer missing, and Holloway Hall left to hum with unanswered questions. The summer passed, then autumn, and life at the university resumed with its strange rhythm. New freshmen moved into Holloway Hall, dragging in futons and posters, laughing in the hallways, as though they didn't know the building's shadow. But the upperclassmen did. They warned each other in quiet tones, "Don't take that room. Don't live on that wing." Jennifer's name slipped into legend status. For incoming students, she was more myth than memory, a story whispered at parties, a warning told by candlelight. The roommate who vanished, the girl who never came back. Her missing posters, long since tattered and sun-bleached, still clung stubbornly to some bulletin boards, as though the paper itself refused to give up. Detectives tried now and then to stir the case back to life. They re-interviewed classmates, followed leads that fizzled out, and compared Jennifer's disappearance to other cases of the era. Some suggested she had run away voluntarily. Others insisted foul play was obvious but hidden just out of reach. The file grew thick with contradictions. One report claimed a student spotted Jennifer at a Greyhound bus station boarding a coach to New York. Another swore they saw her ghostly reflection in the library window late at night. None of it could be proven. Emily's absence made everything murkier. She had slipped from view like a thread pulled through fabric. Rumors placed her everywhere, waitressing in Oregon, studying under a new name in Canada, even hiding abroad. Detectives tried to track her, but her trail was thin, patchy, almost deliberately obscured, and so the case cooled. Holloway Hall kept its silence, the patched wall gathering dust and fingerprints ignored by the very people sworn to investigate. Students graduated, moved away, and carried the story with them, spreading it like folklore. Each telling changed slightly. Sometimes Jennifer had been kidnapped, sometimes buried under the floorboards, sometimes killed in a fit of rage. The unresolved nature of it fed the legend. As one criminologist later remarked, cold cases don't just fade, they ferment. They turn into myths because the human brain craves endings. When none come, we invent them. Historically, universities have always had their urban legends: the library built over a graveyard, the professor who disappeared mid-lecture, the haunted dorm room no one will live in. Jennifer's story slipped easily into that category, except it wasn't invented. A real family still waited for her. A real police file still collected dust in a precinct cabinet. Years passed. The campus changed: new paint, new furniture, even new security systems. But Holloway Hall remained stubbornly the same, its walls too solid to forget what they held. And beneath it all, the nagging suspicion lingered: the truth was still inside, waiting. More than a decade slipped by. Students who once whispered Jennifer's name were long gone, replaced by fresh waves who barely recognized the faded newspaper clippings tacked to the archives board. Holloway Hall itself aged visibly. Its pipes rattled, its paint flaked, and its heating broke down in winter. The university finally decided on a long overdue renovation, selling the building to private developers who planned to gut and modernize it. The crews arrived in hard hats and dusty boots, swinging hammers, peeling away ceilings, and ripping out carpet that smelled of mold. At first, it was just another construction site, loud, messy, alive with the crash of demolition. But on the second week, when workers turned their attention to the north wing of the second floor, things changed. It began when a laborer struck the patched section of wall with his crowbar. The plaster cracked easily, almost too easily, and behind it was not solid brick but hollow space. At first they thought it was a forgotten utility shaft or abandoned ductwork, but the cavity was strange, small, boxed in no access panels, just a void deliberately sealed. When the crowbar broke through fully, a smell rushed out: stale, sour, metallic. The crew staggered back. One worker swore he heard a faint rattle, though later admitted it was probably the echo of debris shifting. They shined a flashlight inside, and silence fell. There within the dust-coated hollow was a tangle of fabric bones and something unmistakably human. Word spread quickly. The renovation halted the site, taped off with police lines. Reporters swarmed the campus before administrators could even draft a press release. Students gathered outside Holloway Hall in hushed clusters, staring up at its brick facade as though it had finally confessed to the secret it had guarded for so long. Inside the cavity, investigators documented the scene with meticulous care. The skeletal remains were curled unnaturally, the space too cramped for comfort. Jennifer's old quilt was draped around part of the body, faded but still patterned with the small sunflowers she loved. A necklace, once listed as missing, glimmered faintly under the flashlight beam. The discovery was shocking, but in some ways inevitable. People had whispered for years that the wall itself held the truth. And now here it was. Jennifer had been there all along. Investigators and academics still debate whether the discovery was a failure or a vindication. On one hand, the evidence had been under everyone's nose, ignored by bureaucracy and hesitation. On the other, the fact that the truth survived long enough to be revealed was almost poetic, like the dormitory refused to keep its secret forever. Forensic experts rushed to the scene, carefully bagging bones, cataloging every scrap of fabric, every trace of hair. The wall that had loomed as a symbol of rumor and fear now became the center of a very real crime scene. And in the silence that followed, the campus realized something chilling: Jennifer had never left. She had been with them inside those walls while generations of students laughed, studied, and slept only feet away. The discovery in Holloway Hall cracked open the case with brutal clarity. Forensic teams worked for days, carefully removing every fragment from the cavity. What remained of Jennifer was heartbreakingly fragile bones, brittle from time hair clumped together with dust and shreds of clothing barely holding their shape. The sunflower quilt, though faded, became the most recognizable relic. Her family, who had waited more than a decade, received the news with equal parts devastation and grim relief. At last, Jennifer was found. No more endless searching, no more holding on to fading hope. But now came the harder question: what exactly had happened inside those walls? The medical examiner's report was inconclusive. The remains showed no obvious signs of trauma, no fractures, no evidence of stabbing or blunt force blows, but the cramped position of the body suggested she had not climbed in willingly. The cause of death was listed as undetermined, though experts leaned toward suffocation or confinement. This ambiguity kept the debates alive. Some investigators argued Jennifer had been attacked, hidden in the wall, and left to die. Others speculated she was placed there post-mortem. Without soft tissue, the answers dissolved into dust, yet the evidence of concealment was undeniable. The cavity had been deliberately sealed, plastered over in a hurry, matching the maintenance logs from the week she vanished. The emergency repairs were no accident. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to entomb her within the building itself. And then there were the belongings. Alongside Jennifer's body, police recovered the very items once found in Emily's locked trunk: her necklace, her ID card, even the hairbrush. The fact they were back here in the wall raised new questions. Had Emily planted them there later, or had she been forced to hand them over? The odd notes "walls remember what people forget" now seemed chillingly prophetic. Investigators returned to those pages with fresh eyes, reinterpreting them not as artistic ramblings, but as coded confessions. Was Emily describing what she had done, or was it an eerie coincidence born of her eccentric style? Historically, cases of hidden remains have always unsettled communities. One criminologist compared Jennifer's fate to the infamous case of Joyce Vincent in London, whose body lay undiscovered in her apartment for years, while life continued just beyond the walls. The resonance of those stories lies in the way the dead remain present, unseen, yet woven into daily existence. Jennifer's case was no different. She had been part of campus life long after her absence. The revelation reignited the media frenzy. Reporters framed Holloway Hall as a dorm of secrets, running archival footage of Jennifer smiling with her friends juxtaposed against the grim discovery. Talk shows debated Emily's role. Former students flooded online forums, sharing memories, rumors, and regrets. Through it all, one name rose back into the spotlight: Emily. Where had she gone? What did she know? And most chillingly, was she the one who sealed Jennifer into that wall? When Jennifer's body was confirmed, law enforcement wasted no time turning their attention back to the one person who had lived closest to her, the one who had seemed strangely untouched by her disappearance: Emily. For years, she had been little more than a shadow in the file, the girl who left campus under a cloud of suspicion. Now she was thrust back into the light. It took months to find her. Investigators pieced together a trail of old addresses, scattered jobs, and name changes. She had moved often, never staying anywhere more than a couple of years, always just far enough ahead to make her difficult to pin down. When they finally located her, she was living in a quiet Midwestern suburb under a married name, working at a bookstore. To her neighbors, she was friendly, but private, the kind of woman who always had her blinds drawn. When detectives arrived on her doorstep, Emily didn't slam the door or run. She simply stood still, pale and rigid, as though she had been waiting for this moment. During questioning, she was careful, deliberate. She denied any involvement, insisting she had no idea what happened to Jennifer. She admitted she'd been overwhelmed by the suspicion years ago, which was why she left. "I couldn't breathe on that campus," she told them. "Everyone looked at me like I was a murderer." but her explanations cracked when detectives presented her with the evidence. The belongings once discovered in her locked trunk belongings that had somehow ended up sealed inside the wall with Jennifer were damning. Emily faltered, claimed she had given them back to campus security when she left a claim no record supported. There was more. Handwriting experts compared the notes from Emily's notebooks. Walls remember what people forget to anonymous letters once sent to Jennifer's parents in the first year after her disappearance. The phrasing, the slant of the letters, the rhythm of the sentences all aligned. The match wasn't 100% conclusive, but strong enough to raise eyebrows. Still, Emily clung to her denials. She claimed the notes were coincidences, her words twisted against her. She reminded detectives there had never been physical evidence of violence, no weapon, no blood, no clear cause of death. "You can't prove I killed her," she said softly during one interview, almost daring them to disagree. Yet public opinion didn't wait for a trial. The media painted her as the jealous roommate consumed with envy over Jennifer's easy charm and social life. Former classmates appeared on television recalling her strange detachment, her cutting remarks, her midnight pacing. A narrative formed Emily the quiet storm that eventually burst. Academics and investigators still debate whether Emily's behavior was guilt or simply the awkward isolation of a woman wrongly accused. History is filled with cases where suspicion hardened into certainty without enough proof. But here the puzzle pieces seemed to click, even if some corners were still jagged. When Emily was finally charged, the community exhaled half in relief, half in dread. The trial promised to be the moment when years of rumor would finally collide with truth. The trial of Emily Summers versus the state opened in a packed courtroom, the air heavy with more than a decade of speculation. Jennifer's family sat in the front row, clutching tissues, their faces drawn but resolute. Reporters filled every available seat, cameras outside the courthouse, feeding a 24-hour news cycle hungry for closure. From the start, the prosecution leaned into motive. They painted Emily as consumed by jealousy, jealous of Jennifer's charisma, her friends, her effortless way of moving through life. They reminded the jury of the strange notes, the belongings in the locked trunk, the telling line, "Walls remember what people forget." They argued Emily acted in a fit of rage, killed Jennifer, and hid her body in the wall before arranging for maintenance to patch it over. The defense countered with a different story. Emily was eccentric, yes, but not a killer. They emphasized the lack of direct forensic evidence, no weapon, no definitive cause of death. They claimed Jennifer could have died accidentally, perhaps during an argument or from intoxication, and Emily panicked, concealing the body out of fear. The defense tried to frame her as overwhelmed, scapegoated by a campus desperate for answers. The courtroom became a theater of memory. Witnesses from college years took the stand: the sophomore who heard thumping above her room that night, the students who saw Emily with the black trash bag, the professors who confirmed her odd writing style. Each testimony added weight, though none delivered the smoking gun. One of the most dramatic moments came when prosecutors revealed maintenance logs showing Emily had filed a noise complaint in the same corridor just hours before the wall repairs were ordered. To them, it was evidence she orchestrated the cover-up. To the defense, it was a coincidence twisted into something sinister. Historically, juries struggle with cases like this where circumstantial evidence piles high, but the physical core remains thin. Legal scholars still debate whether jurors are swayed more by story than by science. Here the story was powerful. Two young women, one gone, the other standing accused. Emily herself testified, her voice calm but laced with an edge. She denied killing Jennifer, but admitted she hated living with her. When pressed about the trunk, she snapped, "I didn't kill her. Keeping her things doesn't make me a murderer." The outburst rippled through the courtroom like a shockwave. In closing arguments, the prosecution spoke of betrayal, how Jennifer trusted Emily as a roommate and ended up buried within the very walls of her home. The defense warned against convicting on rumor, urging the jury not to confuse odd behavior with proof of murder. Deliberations dragged for 2 days. Outside, crowds gathered chanting for justice, holding candles in memory of Jennifer. Inside, jurors wrestled with the same dilemma that had haunted investigators for years. Was there enough to call it murder? When the verdict finally came, the room was silent, except for the foreperson's voice. guilty of manslaughter and concealment of a corpse. Not murder, but not innocent. Jennifer's family wept, clinging to each other. Emily sat stone-still, eyes fixed forward as though the walls around her had finally closed in. The verdict reverberated far beyond the courtroom. News outlets plastered Emily's photo alongside Jennifer's graduation portrait, the two faces forever locked together in headlines. For the public, the case was resolved. For the family, it was both an ending and an open wound. Jennifer's parents spoke softly outside the courthouse. "We have justice, but not our daughter. Nothing will ever fill that space." Their grief was visible, etched into lines that years of waiting had carved deep into their expressions. On campus, the dormitory where everything unfolded became a monument of unease. Students whispered in hallways about the hidden wall, the idea that someone had lived just a few feet from a secret grave. Some refused to live in that building, while others treated it like a morbid legend. The administration eventually remodeled the floor, smoothing over scars with new plaster, brighter paint, fresh carpeting. Yet those who remembered knew the shadows beneath. Emily's sentence was long enough to keep her behind bars for decades, but her demeanor in prison interviews raised eyebrows. She admitted concealment, yes, but never responsibility for Jennifer's death. Some investigators remained convinced she lashed out in anger. Others believed Jennifer suffered a fall or accident, and Emily acted out of fear. The truth, one detective remarked, may be sealed forever, just like those walls once were. One unusual detail stuck with many: the strange phrases Emily had scribbled in her notes. Linguists debated whether they hinted at an obsession, an encoded confession, or simply the ramblings of a lonely student. "Walls remember what people forget" became a haunting slogan repeated in articles and podcasts, a reminder of how secrets cling to the places where they're hidden. For years afterward, criminology classes dissected the case, arguing about evidence thresholds, motive, and psychology. The vanished roommate turned into a lecture topic at universities, an unresolved academic debate about whether justice was truly served. Was Emily guilty of murder, or guilty only of panic and silence? In quiet moments, Jennifer's friends spoke of her warmth, her laughter, her plans for the future. They planted a small garden near campus in her name, a patch of sunlight where people could sit, breathe, and remember. It wasn't about the horror anymore, it was about reclaiming the memory from the shadow of the walls. And so the story settled into history. A vanished roommate, a body in the walls, a friend turned suspect, and a verdict that left room for doubt. The campus moved on. The families carried their grief, and the world kept spinning. But at night, when the dorm's windows glowed against the dark, some swore they could still hear faint echoes, footsteps in a hallway. Laughter cut short the lingering memory of someone who never came back. Now, as I tell you this, I hope you'll carry Jennifer's story gently. These cases remind us how fragile trust can be, how silence can bury truth, and how the answers we long for are sometimes incomplete. So before you drift off tonight, remember to be kind to those closest to you, to ask questions when something feels wrong, and to hold on to the people who bring light into your world. Now turn off the lights, lie back on your comfy cushions, and let's close the story together. Next time, we'll step into another shadowed corner of mystery, this time not in a dormitory, but on a winding stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere. A young man's car is found idling by the roadside, headlights still burning, doors unlocked, and his phone buzzing with unanswered calls on the passenger seat. He had left a gathering just 20 minutes before, promising to be home soon. He never arrived. Police searched the area for days, fields, drainage ditches, even nearby rivers. Nothing. Theories swirled: abduction, accident, or a voluntary disappearance. But then, years later, during a drought that dried up an old quarry, the missing man's car was discovered at the bottom. Inside was evidence that raised even darker questions than before. Was it a tragic accident hidden by circumstance, or something far more sinister? Investigators still argue over whether someone forced him off the road that night, or whether the quarry swallowed a secret no one noticed until nature gave it back. It's a story that pushes us into the unknown, where the line between accident and crime blurs, and where families are left clinging to fragments of truth. If you thought the vanished roommate was unsettling, wait until you hear what they found at the bottom of that quarry.